Imagine dedicating your life to serving your country, only to be disrespected and humiliated by someone sworn to protect the same values. That's exactly what happened to Marcus, a decorated Black Navy SEAL, during what should have been a routine traffic stop. The officer? A cop whose prejudice clouded her judgment from the moment she approached his car. Her words dripped with condescension, and when Marcus calmly tried to explain himself, things quickly escalated. What she didn't realize, though, was that Marcus wasn't just any man. He had faced challenges far greater than her hostility. But instead of reacting with anger, Marcus took a different approach, one that would leave her utterly speechless. How does someone turn such blatant disrespect into a powerful lesson? Stick around to witness a story of resilience, courage, and an unexpected twist that changed everything. You won't believe how it all unfolds. Marcus wasn't just a Navy SEAL, he was a hero, someone who had risked his life countless times for his country. But to this officer, none of that mattered. From the moment she walked up to his car, her demeanor was sharp and accusatory. She demanded his license with a tone that carried more than just authority, it carried judgment. Marcus stayed calm, knowing all too well that situations like this could escalate quickly. What the officer didn't know was that Marcus had recently returned from a grueling mission overseas, still carrying the weight of what he had seen and endured. He wasn't looking for trouble, just a quiet evening to unwind. But as the officer pressed on, making assumptions about him, Marcus started piecing together that this was more than a misunderstanding. There was something deeper at play, and how he handled the next few moments would define everything. The officer leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing as she scanned Marcus's car, looking for something, anything, that might justify her hostility. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" she asked, her voice dripping with suspicion. Marcus's calm reply didn't satisfy her. "Just passing through," he said, keeping his tone steady despite the tension hanging in the air. But it was clear she wasn't interested in his answers. In her mind, she'd already decided who Marcus was. He could see it in the way she gripped her flashlight, in the way her questions seemed less about understanding and more about control. Meanwhile, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the irony. Here he was, a man trained to handle life-or-death situations, now being interrogated for simply existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. But then something unexpected happened. Another car pulled up, and someone stepped out. Marcus turned to see who it was, and everything suddenly felt even more uncertain. The headlights from the other car cut through the night, casting long shadows as a tall figure stepped out. Marcus could feel the officer tense, her hand instinctively moving toward her belt. The air grew heavier as the man approached. It was an older gentleman, calm but determined, his voice breaking the silence. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his tone even but laced with curiosity. The officer, caught off guard, hesitated for a moment before replying. "This is a routine stop," she said, her tone sharp, as if trying to regain control of the situation. Marcus, still seated, watched closely, sensing a shift in the dynamic. The man introduced himself as a local pastor, someone who often checked on his community during late hours. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing this moment was critical. The pastor's presence seemed to diffuse some of the tension, but it was clear the officer wasn't ready to back down. Marcus could feel the weight of years of prejudice in her gaze. He knew what he was up against, and he knew this wasn't over. The pastor looked at Marcus, as if silently urging him to hold his ground. The question now was, how far would the officer go, and how would Marcus respond? The officer's hand lingered near her holster as she turned her attention back to Marcus, her voice tight with authority. "Step out of the vehicle," she demanded. Marcus hesitated, his instincts telling him this situation could spiral out of control. The pastor, sensing the tension, gently spoke up. "Officer, is that really necessary? He hasn't done anything wrong." But she ignored him, her focus solely on Marcus. Slowly he complied, stepping out of the car with his hands visible. The officer's demeanor shifted, as if she was determined to find something incriminating. She began questioning Marcus again, her tone growing more confrontational. Then, from the corner of his eye, Marcus noticed another police cruiser pulling up. The reinforcements weren't what he expected, though. A second officer stepped out, a familiar face. It was someone Marcus had trained with during his early Navy SEAL days. Their eyes met, and the recognition was instant. The tension hung in the air as the second officer approached, his expression unreadable. Would he side with his partner or intervene? Marcus braced himself, knowing this moment could either de-escalate the situation or make it far worse. The stakes had never been higher. As the second officer approached, the tension in the air was almost unbearable. He glanced at the situation, taking in Marcus's calm but alert stance, the pastor's concerned expression, and the first officer's rigid demeanor. "Marcus," he asked, his voice tinged with surprise, "is that you?" The first officer froze, her expression shifting from confidence to confusion. Marcus gave a small nod. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" he replied. The second officer turned to his partner, his tone firm but measured. "Do you know who this is? Marcus served with me in the Navy. He's one of the most honorable men I've ever met." The first officer's face fell as the realization set in. Her assumptions had been wrong from the start. For a moment, it seemed like the situation was resolved, but then Marcus did something no one expected. Instead of lashing out or demanding an apology, he extended his hand to the officer. "We've all got something to learn," he said simply. The act of grace stunned everyone. The officer hesitated, then slowly shook his hand, her expression a mix of guilt and relief. The pastor smiled, the second officer gave a nod of approval, and Marcus quietly walked back to his car. As he drove off, he couldn't help but feel that the moment was bigger than him, a lesson in how courage and kindness can break through even the toughest walls. As Marcus drove away, the weight of the moment lingered in the air. The officer stood in silence, her partner quietly speaking to her, likely sharing stories of Marcus's service and sacrifice. The pastor watched them for a moment before walking back to his car, a sense of hope softening the tension of what had just unfolded. For Marcus, it wasn't about winning or proving a point. It was about showing that even in moments of injustice, there's power in choosing grace over anger. He knew the officer would reflect on her actions, and he hoped that next time she might approach someone with understanding rather than judgment. The story didn't end with anger or confrontation. It ended with a reminder that we all carry the potential to change, to see beyond assumptions, and to treat each other with the respect every person deserves. And in the end, that's what truly matters.